Communication is like buying a house. The less you pay up front, the more you pay in monthly installments. I was so hungry and so in pain, Matt, that I was doing those interviews for me. I wasn't doing it for the audience.
Omar Elattar, the creator and the host of The Passionate Few.
Quitting Tesla and pursue his dream as a podcast host. He has interviewed people like Ed Milet, the Hot Cheetos guy, Tom Billionaire,
the guy who invented the game.
The more work you do up front, the more you can mitigate lesser expenses down the road. And I learned that with communication. In a world of constants, what are the variables? You talk to Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, these types of guys, their concepts are usually very simple. People with very big businesses usually do a few things very simply, become brilliant at the basics. How does a person made of the same skin, flesh, and bones like me and you, how do they have a Ferrari? How do they have $1 million house? I wanted to know, like, what are the profit margins? Who owns this? I wonder what the kitchen looks like. I always had all these questions. I just take like a deep breath and I walk up casually. I remember I was so nervous that I got like cotton mouth. So I walk up, I was kind of like behind them. So I was like, excuse me, Grant Cardone, tell me how do I get rich?
Do it with consistency.
Yes, it's always something you don't know, but sometimes it's somebody who introduces that to you. Had I not had that pain, I probably wouldn't have had the combustion. So you could spend time figuring it out, or you could find the person.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to jump right into it. Today, we have Omar Elattar from The Passionate Few. And the reason that you should stay to the end and that you should really get your notepad out and pay attention to what Omar is about to share with you guys. He's been on an amazing journey. He's created a show that has over 500 episodes. It's watched globally. I mean, there's people all over the world that reach out to Omar. They reach out to him for advice, for guidance, what he knows, and the people he's interviewed who are self-made billionaires, who are also just globally known people. They're the heads of major brands. Their stories are amazing. Omar has taken so much information from all of those interviews, from all the people that he's met, and he himself has created such a brand, and he's on such an amazing journey that today we're going to deliver value to all of you by sharing nuggets. They're like gold. This is the keys to success. This is what you've learned from everybody you've interviewed. So welcome to the show and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Matt. It's an honor to connect, and I appreciate the kind words and intro, and also excited for all the stuff you're doing and excited to bring value to the audience who stays tuned to the very end.
That's fantastic. Listen, we could start in so many places with you. Before we get into all these like really cool things that you've learned and things that you know, just give us a quick background. Your story is amazing, and like how you got into the show that you have, your own dream, your vision. You saw things in your head and you took them to like what they are today. And in there, please don't skip over how you got Grant Cardone on your show, because that story is an amazing story. And it's part of like, don't be afraid to just go after something.
Yeah, man. I'll give you the quick version. Basically, long story short, about 5-ish years ago, I was in a place where I was working at Tesla. I was a top performer in sales at Tesla, and I always had visions for my life, but I found myself, kind of in a situation where I was quote unquote successful in the eyes of everyone else. They were like, wow, you're at Tesla. That's awesome. But I wasn't really fulfilled, right? And Tony Robbins talks about this concept of success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure, right? I just got back from Egypt, where I was in a third world country, and I was there taking care of my grandmother. But in the country, I got to see so many people in humble situations with huge smiles on their face that sometimes I have people down the street in multi-million-dollar mansions I don't even see that kind of energy from, right? And so there's this concept that we all know about of like success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. But on a micro version, I was experiencing it, right? Obviously, those are extreme examples, but I found myself in a situation where I had money, I was making in sales, but the best my life could get to was maybe a promotion at Tesla. And I was so frustrated because I always had these big dreams, big ambitions. I wanted to do big stuff, but I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't know what I was good at. I was okay in school. I graduated university, but never was really inspired. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know the vehicle. I didn't have the verticals. I didn't have anybody around me to kind of show me the way. And so long story short, 5 years ago, I was feeling that kind of depression. I was drinking, I was smoking, I was doing a bunch of, substances I shouldn't be doing. I was in a really self-sabotaging place. And I was in a relationship with a girl who I was totally in love with. And I shared this on Jordan Belfort's podcast, Wolf of Wall Street. But I was always like, the playboy, got the girls and all this stuff. I was the cool guy. And for once, my ego was put in check and humbled because she broke up with me. And this was the first girl that I ever loved, talked about marriage, all the fluffy stuff that I reserved for so many years. And
how old were you?
I was 25-ish, something like that. And and I were like marriage and all this stuff, right? And long story short, it was a one-way street. The feelings weren't mutual. And one day she calls me, and keep in mind, I'm in a rock bottom already with everything in my life. So she was the one thing I was kind of clinging to, which probably is why she broke up with me. But long story short, she calls me one day, point blank, cold turkey, and she just wants to end the relationship. She can't do it anymore. Now, keep in mind, prior to that, there was no really big fights, no big issues. Just one day, point blank, ends it. And I was devastated. And I didn't argue, didn't anything. I was so overwhelmed with frustration, sadness, questions. And did she cheat on me? Like, I was so overwhelmed, and I was already in a bad place. And I literally just accepted it and said, okay. And I hung up that day. I remember I was at the gym, and I sat on the steps of the gym, just crying profusely to myself.
Wow.
And I just remember thinking to myself, man, like, how is this my life? All these dreams, all these goals, all these books I've read, all these seminars I've been to, all this personal development stuff I'm consuming. And yet here I am, fat as shit, broke as hell, in debt, selling Teslas. And keep in mind, when I'm selling these Teslas, everyone I'm selling them to are people living their dreams, entrepreneurs, the types of clientele that sell Teslas. So on the one hand, I've always been well-spoken. It sharpened my ability to communicate with high-level people. But I'm meeting, Bill Clinton's pilot on Air Force One. I sold a Tesla to. I'm meeting real estate investors, big time entrepreneurs, like multimillionaires, celebrities. But then I go back to my reality, and it's, anything but that. And so I just had this combustion of frustration and these examples that just rubbed it in every day that I was selling the cars to. So
and
just
your location, like you were in that area in California where you still are. Like there's a lot.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. Orange County,
there's a
California.
lot of wealth and fame, and even people that aren't famous, there's still a lot of money.
Correct. Yes. We were selling in the county that I believe is still the highest performing county in Tesla in the country, like the highest sales. So I'm around a lot of success, but internally I'm feeling like anything but that. And so long story short, I'm just painting the picture of the combustion I was in. So cold turkey one day, I had a couple $100 left in my bank account. I was spending, money left and right to like numb the pain of what I was doing. So I'd make 10 grand a month in sales or 7 grand a month in sales, which to me at the time was like $1 million.
You're 25.
I was 25 and, in commissions, and I was doing well at Tesla, but I would spend, twice that a month. So I was going into credit card debt fast, just numbing the pain. There was no end in sight. The best case scenario is being like the cranky manager that I was working for, a lot of ego there, like the whole thing. And so I just remember like crying profusely, and I didn't even have the girl to complain to. And I'm seeing all my friends who went to university. Some are starting to go into medical school, right? I'm starting to see people around me ascend. And yet I was the personal development guy who had all these inspired ideas, but yet I was a loser in my mind at the time. This is how I was languaging. And
Omar, at that time, so obviously there's no show. You had nothing else that you have going on now. None of that was going on. Okay.
Zero. No
was
brand.
That even in your mind at that time? Was it a dream, an idea?
So no, the answer is no.
Okay.
But I knew what I loved, but I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't see the way, I loved Howard Stern, for example. And to me, I wanted to be a hybrid between Tony Robbins and Howard Stern, which I know that juxtaposition is quite extreme.
You're not tall enough.
Exactly. But, that was kind of the dream. Like I wanted to do that. I didn't know the medium, and then I wanted to get into radio. Maybe I intern at a radio station, right? I'm just taking these leaps of guesses, but then keep in mind, I'm going to tell my parents, I'm 25. I'm going to leave Tesla to go intern at a radio station. Like it's just a lot of limiting beliefs showing up, and then I'm not in the most confident state. I don't have support, right? So I'm just in this downward spiral. And so long story short, I have a couple $100, in my checkings account, and someone tells me about this life coach, one of my buddies. And so it was like $250 for an hour, which to me at the time I had never invested in myself. So that to me sounded ridiculous, $250. But I said, screw it. Like I'm going to spend it on something stupid anyways. Like nothing's going to get me out. Might as well invest in myself. So I spent that $250 on Coach Dave Thorpe, which I still work with him till today. He's one of my coaches. I have several, but he's still one of them. And Dave Thorpe, I remember he asked me, I bawled crying. I told him everything, and we opened up. We met at a Starbucks one day. I still have a photo, and we got a notebook out and came up with this master plan. I was crying. There's still teardrops on the page. I know it sounds dramatic. This is literally true. I'm not, showboating here, but he asked me, Omar, if life was perfect, what would happen next? If life was
Before
perfect,
you go any further, right there, just point out something that I don't want anybody to overlook. You're 25 years old, and you had the awareness to stop and say, let me have a life coach, like somebody who isn't just like, hey, I'm a life coach. I'm sure that he's somebody that's helped really give you good, valuable information. I would almost say probably a mentor, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
That's so important. I don't want you to glaze over like that. Having that mentor, like to help get you on track, but critical, right?
Yeah. keep in mind too, like it was very unfamiliar. It wasn't like the world of today where it's like common or whatever. I was loaded with limiting beliefs, didn't have the money, felt very scared. Like, well, what could he tell me? But I think I just was so aware that I can't do this on my own. And I think accepting that is very hard, especially for anyone, but especially as a man who's trying to figure his way in the world, you know. But I was just like, I'm maxed out on all of the good ideas I can think of. I need some support. Later, I would learn about the concept of who, not how, which is my favorite phrase these days, because if you're ever stuck, there's either something you don't know or someone you don't know that opens up that next level. Who, not how. At the time, I wasn't privy to that, but I invest the $250. I sit down, we mastermind, I'm bawling, and he tells me, Omar, we're going to do two things. Number one, I want you to write down the way life is, right? And then number two, he told me, write down the way you want life to be. And then this session is going to be about bridging that gap, right? And so he said, if life was perfect, what would happen next? And the only condition is that don't give me anything vague. Don't give me anything vague. Give me specific that you know. Start with what you know and let it grow. So I said, if life was perfect, and keep in mind, I don't have any idea that it would evolve to a podcast and a show and blah, 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 and all this. I'm just going off what my insecure little scared self in my 20s knew that day. And I said, if life was perfect, I would surround myself with amazing, inspiring people. I would be in the personal development industry. I would inspire millions of people. I would find a way to make millions of dollars. And I would have a great team that supports me in that journey. And I would impact lives honestly, sustainably. And what I do would give me energy and not take away energy. And I'm okay being patient in that process. And he said, okay. And then he said, well, what ingredients do we have to make that happen? And so we talked about my skills. What are my strengths? Okay. Communicating. What are my strengths? Networking. Okay. What are my weaknesses? Okay. My weaknesses are XYZ, right? And so we just little by little started taking inventory. Kind of the way he explained it to me was kind of like, before you worry about the entree and being envious of other people's entrees that they can cook up or chef up in the kitchen of their life, he said, just let's lay down all the ingredients you have on the table. And then once we identify those ingredients that we have and don't have, i.e. strengths and weaknesses, then we can decide on the entree we want to make, the business idea we want to act on, the first steps or whatever. So we literally just took inventory. And I said, well, came to the conclusion, okay, well, he said, well, what about becoming a radio host? And I said, oh, that would be my dream. He said, who's living your dream that you can see, even if you don't see the path? So I said, Howard Stern, Tony Robbins, all these guys, right? And he goes, okay, well, what's a step one of what you could do? I said, well, I don't know, work at a radio station, intern at a radio station, right? Like that was my best idea. He goes, well, Omar, may I suggest to you a platform called YouTube? And I said, yeah, I know YouTube. And he goes, I go, but I don't know how to do it. I don't have a camera. I don't have a video guy. I don't know, am I good at it? How do I do it? How does it cost? I don't have any money to fund it. Like all the limiting beliefs show up when we commit, right? And but see the power of questions. And he goes, Omar, slow down, right? Slow is smooth. In the military, they talk about this concept: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So slow down. And he goes, okay, what if we just do one video? Just one video. And I said, okay, I could do that. And he goes, okay, what ingredients would we need to make one video? And I said, okay, well, a guest and a video camera. I didn't know about audio or multiple cameras. I don't know about any of this at the time, right? So I just said, okay, a guest and a camera. And he goes, okay, a local guest you could interview? And so what he was doing was simplifying the complex into bite-sized steps, right? Complexity is the enemy of execution. At the time, it was a big blur of complexity in my mind. But what I've learned, and what a lot of successful entrepreneurs that I've learned since then, is that a lot of times, you talk to Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, these types of guys, their concepts are usually very simple. People with very big businesses usually do a few things very simply, become brilliant at the basics.
And they do it with consistency.
Yes, exactly.
Over time.
Yes, exactly. And the compounded effect of that. But see, you don't know that when you're just starting. You assume there's some brilliant, magical, complex formula, but at the end of the day, the way you make a Miss Fields cookie and make $100 million is just put extra brown butter. right? It's always these simple little things, but it's the wasted time of imagining all these, complexities. And so bottom line is, he goes, okay. And I said, yeah, I'd want to interview one of these three people. And they were like a local real estate guy who was a big time in our area, like just very tangible people at Tesla. He even suggested, well, couldn't you get the contact? You already have the contacts with them. Couldn't you interview that Air Force One pilot, or couldn't you talk to? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea.
There you go.
And then the dots sort of start to connect. And then I said, well, what about a video camera? I can't afford anybody. And he goes, do you have any friends with a camera? And then I start thinking, I never thought about that. And I go, oh yeah, my guy this, and usually at 25, my mid 20s, that's when some of my friends had been photographers in high school, or, I'm starting to remember all these people. And he goes, might some of them be willing to do it for free in exchange for the experience? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. Yeah. And he goes, do you have anyone you can call right now in the next 5 minutes? Right. And so And so it began demystifying all of the complexities that I assumed were hard or complex or scary. And so by the end of that session, I was a YouTuber and had emailed the first person I would interview and found a videographer to do it. And so within a week, I had filmed my first video, and now this complex idea was up on YouTube. And now that built a little bit of confidence. And then little by little, now I start to see the vision. And I don't understand fully, but to kind of like close up the story on how I started getting bigger, yes, relatively fast is that
Can I
first
just
year.
interject something real before you go there?
Yeah, absolutely.
You just mentioned a few things, and you began by talking about limiting beliefs, which what I actually heard in saying it a different way is almost like a victim mindset, almost like, I don't know, or not that you were coming from the place of being a victim, but it's very much programmed into so many people to be helpless, but
Yes.
and in society. So you mentioned about what would your parents think, earlier on. It's like it all comes from that same place of all these limiting beliefs that are like, wow, it's so easy to move them out of the way. And what this gentleman did was he sparked an idea and kind of like gave you some path, like to just follow him down. Almost like a
Yes.
horse to ride out on. Like, I'm in a corner, let me get out of the corner. And all of a sudden you discover, well, oh, maybe it isn't so limiting. And I just have to take action.
Yes, exactly. And what I've learned is that anytime anybody's ever stuck in life, it's one of two issues. It's perception or procedure. And simplified in layman's terms, it's either something you don't know. I mean, it's always something you don't know, but sometimes it's somebody who introduces that to you. So you could spend time figuring it out, or you could find the person. And so now anytime you go, I don't know what to do, like think about I'll give you an example. I know a lot of people who started podcasting and YouTube around the same time I did. Every single one of them tried to edit the videos themselves, tried to film it with a camera themselves, got overwhelmed funding it themselves, right? Like I wasn't established when I started. Like it was very expensive for me to invest a couple $100 per shoot or per edit. Like, so what I did was strategically negotiate it, right? Creative negotiation. I found a videographer and I said, hey, look, I'm not making any money from this, but I believe in it. Here's my vision. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what YouTube revenue could be. Here's how I'm going to monetize it. I just need 6 to 12 months of belief. It won't be that much. We'll just do interviews occasionally. You want to come on this journey with me? It was my buddy, Luis Castro. Shout out to Luis. He's still one of my best friends till today. And I said, hey man, like, I don't have any money to pay you, but I'm down to 50-50 revenue from the show with you. Now, obviously, probably not the most intelligent business negotiation to just right off the bat give away 50%, but I didn't know any better. And it got the ball rolling. Yeah. But that allowed me very early on in the space to have no fear on the capital. And so imagine now I went from no clue how to do this to like, I quit my job at Tesla and now I'm all in. Keep in mind, I have like $30,000 of credit card debt, but I didn't, all of a sudden I was free from the burden of, I got to film, I got to edit, and I got to pay. And I didn't have to do any of that just because I negotiated with like, hey, I'll give you 50%. And that ended up being a great deal. He ended up making tens of thousands of dollars because that first 1 to 2 years, he ended up making more than I ever would have paid him as a freelancer. But because he was patient to go on the journey with me, and he would film interviews for free. He would edit them for free, and we would make badass edits and we put them up on YouTube. And my girlfriend at the time, who had broken up with me, she introduced me to Grant Cardone. She loved hot Cheetos. She loved Quest bars. And so out of spite or motivation or revenge. So this is the story of how I got Grant Cardone, creator of Hot Cheetos, and Tom Billy, billion-dollar founder of Quest, on the podcast. So my girlfriend, who had broken up with me at the time, left me devastated. I was heartbroken, and I was trying to find a way to make it work, right? Find a way to make my life work, start this podcast.
Wait, did you already have some shows up at this point?
No shows up. I had put a couple of videos out, but like maybe 3 or 4 videos. One was an interview with a homeless guy on an iPhone that I filmed. I literally went from interviewing a homeless guy on my iPhone to interviewing like billionaires with like $30,000 cameras.
You partnered with somebody to get some of the skills that you needed to get it going, like some people around you. And now you're like, okay, I need to get some guests. But did you already know like what you wanted to talk about? Was there a vision for, because your show and you?
I was so hungry and so in pain, Matt, that I was doing those interviews for me. And I wasn't doing it for the audience, meaning I wanted the audience to benefit, but I was in such a place where I wanted the answers. So when I was doing these interviews, I wasn't doing it to build a brand. I wasn't doing it to look cool on social. I was doing it because I'm like, Grant Cardone, tell me how do I get rich? Right? Like in my crazy mind, it came from such a place of hunger and desire. And keep in mind too, I'm in my young 20s. The ambition, the testosterone is booming. Yeah. So I got a point to prove because that girl broke my heart. So the pain of that heartbreak, I remember my coach asked me, he said, either this means we're going to break down or break through, and you choose what it is. And so I choose to use the pain of that heartbreak to fuel me through the fears, right? I felt the fear and did it anyways. I got resourceful. Had I not had that pain, I wouldn't have had the combustion to fight through some of the limiting beliefs. I can't afford it. I'm not good at videographer. I'm not good at editing. Why would this big name sit down with me? But I threw
All the
caution to the
stuff.
wind. All that stuff that all of us go through. And I threw caution to the wind. I said, go. It started with that coach because now I just thought, what would Dave say? Any objection or any obstacle I gave Dave, he'd always shut me down.
Like to have something like that. Do you remember when we were sitting, you and I were at, this like 2 years ago, maybe we were sitting at that Ritz in Laguna Beach.
Yes.
And we were having a drink and you were telling me the story of this girl.
Yes.
And it was, I mean, just to fuel the fire a little bit. I mean, you were like really going to town on what she did to you. And what I mean by that is what you did to yourself and the way that it really fired you up and you were just pissed off. And I think it's kind of where you're going with this now.
100%. In my mind, like, she broke my heart so much and I was dead silent on that phone call. I didn't argue with her. I didn't, what? Come on, let's talk about it. Like, what? I just remember so like there was just such a fire inside that literally, like, not that I was suicidal, but I was just like, man, I just fuck it. Just fuck it. Just fuck it. Just so much pain of like, fuck any fear I have. Forget people laughing at my face. Who cares if I embarrass myself? Just F it. There was so much pain that literally the pain of not proving her wrong was greater than any kind of anxiety or pain or financial whatever to make it happen. And I didn't have a clear plan of monetization or nothing. I remember thinking, screw it. Let's just find out what happens, right? Because we know what happens if I stay here and cry for myself and feel bad and get promoted at Tesla. Like, the best case scenario of that is still less than the worst case scenario of this. I had that awareness. And so
you turned this into this really positive growth mindset energy.
Later, I think it was chiseled to that. But if I'm honest, the first couple months, it was really spiteful, dark energy. I was motivated by proving her wrong, to be honest with you. I mean, it long since faded. It didn't even matter to me 12 months after. But that first 3 to 6 months of the heartbreak, it was just like, you don't want my time? Like, I'll show you who wants my time. Like, I will have millions of people be like, dang, Omar, you're a valuable person. You know, like, you didn't, like, I will prove it to you to the nth degree, you know?
I have to ask you something underneath that before you tell us this, because you're about to go into the Cardone story, which is
right.
It's a huge message. Like, this is how you approach things. Do you think you had that type of thing underneath there? Was it really her? She was a catalyst, but was there anything else? Was it your parents? Was it
Uncle Dave? Yeah, my Uncle Dave.
Like, was there just something else underneath there that you were really trying to prove something to somebody else, and she was just the catalyst?
I think so.
You know?
I think I had the fire and the coal burning, but she was the gasoline that made it urgent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I remember many times writing emails, because keep in mind, to get a lot of these big interviews, like, I got hundreds. I sent hundreds that never responded. Billionaires, millionaire, all sorts of big name people. I was nobody. I had no brand, no nothing. I had a couple of videos on YouTube with like a skateboarder, a homeless guy with my iPhone. Like, I had there was nothing. It was just pure inspiration and strategic communication. And so, but she was definitely what made me do it now, what made it urgent. I might have waited or might have found a different medium, but what made me have the guts to, like, you know, so I'll get into the story. Like, essentially within the first 6 to 12 months of starting the podcast, I had a few videos up, a handful, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, or less than that even, maybe. And this is how I actually got the interviews with Grant Cardone, the creator of Hot Cheetos and the $1 billion founder of Quest, Tom Bilyeu. Is she actually introduced me to Grant Cardone, because I remember by her bookshelf in her room, she had a bunch of books by Cardone. I'm like, who's this guy? And so she introduced me to, like, the sales world of the sales training and all this. And then she loved Hot Cheetos and she loved Quest bars. And so I remember thinking to myself when I started the show, like, I wonder if I interviewed these people, like, how much that would blow her mind. And didn't even say a word to her. Just on YouTube on her own. One day she's on YouTube, she'll be like, whoa, that's weird. Oh, another one. Oh, another one. Another one. Another one. You know, to the degree that she got back with her ex, and I wanted her ex to be a fan of my show. Like it was really like,
happen at some point. By the way, have you ever heard from her again?
I did hear from her, and let's just say I made good on my internal promise with myself.
I mean, that Cardone interview is like the most widely viewed interview of him in the world, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, especially at that time. It was the #1 most watched and downloaded interview in the world. And that was right when Cardone came out. And I was really early to the space of telling the stories. A lot of people talked about business principles, but, you know, even Grant to this day will tell me that's the best interview he's ever done, because we did it in Malibu. He was on vacation with his wife. His shoes were off. He was smoking a cigar. We're doing it on the ocean. And he's talking about his drug addiction, how he met Elena, how he hooked up with her friend. Like, he was just super candid. It took away this mask of the business guy, and he loved it. And ever since, me and Grant have been really cool, and we've done multiple interviews since. But yeah, and so long story short is how I got these interviews was at the time I have no connections, but I was in California, he's in Florida. And so I saw that him and his wife, Elena, were in LA in Beverly Hills at a restaurant having dinner. While I saw on their Instagram story they were talking, and I hear in the background very faintly, she goes, "Hey, Grant, are we still going to dinner at this place at 7 in Beverly Hills?" And I knew the place, but it was very faint in the background of his Instagram story. And I look at my watch and I'm like, there's like 4 hours till that time. In traffic, it's 2 hours away. Oh, that's stupid. And I thought to myself, maybe I could go interview him. Like, oh, that's stupid. Like, what am I doing? That's weird. But I remember thinking to myself, this is either going to be the greatest story ever or like an epic failure. But either way, the story would have been worth it. You know what I mean? Yeah, time will fly anyways, and who knows? Everyone need it because keep in mind too, I always was a Howard Stern guy. I always listened to 60 Minutes and interviews of people who took stupid chances. Steven Spielberg, how he went to the Universal a lot and snuck in and put an office up and snuck his way into. So I always would hear stories about people who took these third door weird chances, and I thought, this is my opportunity. Of course, when you're in it, it's a lot more scary than the romanticized version of it working out. But I figured, screw it. So I drive to Beverly Hills. I wait outside the restaurant. My heart is racing outside. The whole time I'm like, this is stupid. What am I doing? My mouth is dry. I'm like cotton mouth. What am I going to say? Who am I? This is stupid. All these stupid things in my head. But I'm just thinking, imagine if it works. Imagine if it works. Just imagine if it works. And so I wait outside the restaurant, and I kind of stake out the place from the outside, and I'm waiting across the street. And this is Beverly Hills.
Right.
Very fancy. I'm not dressed for the occasion. I wait outside the restaurant and I walk in because I'm like, I'm going to stake out the inside of the place, or I definitely can't afford to eat there. And so I go in, I see the stewardess, and I say, "Hi, I was just wondering if where's the restroom at? I'm waiting for a party. I'm gonna use the restroom." And she points the direction. So I go to the restroom in the back, and as I'm walking to it, I'm kind of subtly kind of scoping out the place to see if they're actually here, right? And so I use the restroom. I don't see them on the way there, but as I'm walking out, I hear a very familiar voice. And sure enough, it's Grant and Elena having wine. But there's no food on the table. They're having wine. So I know, like, okay, it's going to be a while, right? They're just kind of listening, but they're there. And I see them, and I'm like, holy shit, it's game time. And now my heart's racing at 150 miles an hour.
Right.
And so I walk outside, and I'm waiting, and I wait around the corner at the restaurant right next to him, and I'm pretending I'm on the phone, the whole thing. And for literally 2 hours, Matt, I'm sitting there. Every time the door opens, my heart's racing. Oh, it's not them. Racing. It's not that, right? Because every time someone goes in and out of that restaurant, I have to be ready to turn on. What am I going to say? How am I going to do? And I'm going through the script in my head. Okay, I don't want to sound weird. I want to be cool. Do I act like I just happened to be here? Do I tell them I drove here? How do I, right? Like all these.
You had it already played. Like you did know what you were going to say.
I had a vague idea of energy, but not the words, right? Because the key in situations like that is to be very relaxed, assertive. But it's a very fine line between being a fanboy that they're like, whoa, like get away.
Yeah.
And then also keep in mind, like I drove 2 hours, and I also couldn't afford valet. So I like parked up in the hill in Beverly Hills, the Hollywood Hills in Beverly Hills. Everybody knows parking is terrible in LA.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford the valet, and with my car, I was embarrassed, at the time. So I like park it and like run down the hill. Like it's literally like a movie, man.
It's so funny hearing. You've told me the story a few times, but I only know you the way I know you for like the past 3 years, and I just can't. I don't know you this way, so it's hard to picture it. It's a really funny story knowing you now.
Oh, it's hilarious. I go to the restaurant, and I'm waiting outside, and every time the door opens, my heart's racing. Is it them? Is it not? Is it them? Is it not? So finally, Cardone and his wife walk out, and I see them, and I am just like nervous beyond belief, right? Because I'm like, shit, it's go time. And I only have a small window of time between when they walk out of the restaurant and go to valet. So they give the valet guy the key or the ticket, whatever, for him to go get the car. So I'm like, this is my like 60-second time to strike. I just take like a deep breath, and I walk up casually. And I remember I was so nervous that I got like cotton mouth, and you're like the throat, your bag, your throat.
Yeah, you're nervous. Yeah.
So I walk up to him, and I was kind of like behind them. So I was like, excuse me, Grant. Excuse me, Grant. Like I had to say it like 3 or 4 times because I said it so low because I was so timid.
Right.
So finally Grant like turns around, and I go, hey, don't mean to bother you, man. My name is Omar. I just want to say I'm a big fan of all your work and the 10X book and everything you've done. And I just want to say it's an honor to meet you, man. And I'd love to shake your hand and take a photo. He goes, yeah, man, absolutely. And he goes, were you in town, or did you know I was going to be here or what? I said, yeah, to be honest, I saw that you mentioned that you guys were going to be here. And then he kind of looked at Elena like it was a little weird, but kind of let it go. Like Grant's pretty easygoing. And they also had drank wine. So to me, that's why I wanted to wait till after, right? So they were loose.
Increase the odds.
Increase the odds. There you go. And so Elena's there, and I shake her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm very elegant and respectful and courteous. And then I said, I said thanks, and he goes, wow, man. So I tell him, I said, yeah. And he goes, how far do you live from here? I said, to be honest, I drove about 2 hours, but with traffic, it took like 2-3 hours. And he goes, you drove 2-3 hours just to shake my hand and meet me? And I said, yes, sir, man. I'm a big fan. I just wanted to thank you. He goes, wow, man, it's cool. Let's grab a photo. And so we take the photo, and the valet guy is like, he's taking time to get the car or something. So I have, a pocket of time. So I said, by the way, Grant, right? And I had been listening to all his sales training, the 10X book, because I work at Tesla. So I know all the sales stuff. So I brought up his objections in advance. I said, hey, Grant, by the way, I know you're in town for a week on vacation. And I know you would normally never do this. I have a random ask, and if no, it's totally okay. But I have a podcast and YouTube show where we interview a lot of high-level people, authors, business people. And by the way, I didn't at all. I
love it.
I'm just saying it.
Right.
And I said it's in post-production, right? Because that was my way of saying like, oh, it's coming out soon, but that there's nothing there.
Right.
So that part I had canned, right? That was the only 10 seconds I had like memorized.
It sounds good.
I said, I got a couple of episodes in post-production. I would love to, film with you. It'd just be 1 hour of your time. We can come to you. If not, no problem. But, would love to do it. And I know you would normally never do this, but consider me the young man you once were when someone gave you a chance, And it was very smooth. Like now it was long-winded, but I did that in probably like 15 seconds. So it was very elegant and smooth, and he was relaxed. They drank wine. I took a photo. He appreciated the fact that I drove. It was a good energy. And Elena was there, and she was like, wow. And Elena goes, yeah, man, I think you should do it. He drove all the way here. So I was just like,
they're in.
So Grant just looks at me. He pauses for a second. He goes, you got a business card? And I don't know how, by the grace of God, I had a business card in my pocket. I don't know how. You pretend, when you don't have a business card and someone says, do you have one? And you pretend to check, but you don't actually have one.
Right.
I did that move, and somehow, by the grace of God, I actually did have one. And I gave it to him, and he just looks at it and he goes, all right, man, I like you. He goes, I'll do your interview. He goes, here, grab my assistant's number. Her name was Katie at the time. He goes, grab my assistant's number. I grabbed the number and text her, and he goes, we'll be in touch and we'll do it. Can you do it this week? And I'm just like, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm like, yes, absolutely. And he goes, all right, and you guys can come to us. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, and how long do you need? And I was like, oh, just be an hour. We'll be in and out. And he goes, all right, cool. I'll have my team get in touch. Took a photo, and I'll send you the photo. And he's like, all right, shook their hand, took the photo, and then I left, and I was on cloud fucking 9, dude. I was like, holy shit. But now I got to figure out a videographer. I got to figure out a shoot. I got to figure out how to pay for it. I got to figure out all this stuff. Canceled my whole schedule. Like, you know what I mean? I had a bunch of stuff going on. I canceled everything. So I just
How long was it between when you had the conversation with Coach and this? Like, how many months had gone by?
I would say, God, hard to date, but I would say less than 6 months, maybe 3 to
couple months. It's pretty quick. So you go from nothing, it's like not even an idea in your head and somebody coaching you along to you're about to get Grant Cardone.
Yeah. And dude, keep in mind, at this time, it wasn't like now where people are on a lot of shows. Like getting Grant at that time was like huge. Yeah. And I was a nobody. It's not like I was an established guy. You know what I mean? Like I was at that time, I moved back into my mom's house at that time, and I'm riding in a Toyota Corolla from my mom's house, right? Like it's a very the story doesn't make sense, but in a crazy way it did. So long story short, I call a bunch of real estate offices. My buddy, Wally El-Sharif, shout out to We're Real Estate Group. I call him and I say, hey man, I'm filming an interview with Grant Cardone. Would you be open to sponsor it? I found a videographer who charged $550. I didn't have $550 at the time, but I got him to pay for it. Like he funded it in exchange for having his real estate logo, like on the front of it, episode brought to you by our Real Estate Group. So I got it funded, found the video guy. And 2 days later, we shoot the interview. The day we release it, keep in mind, I'd never had experience with views. The day we release it, it's like 1,000 views, 5,000 views, 10,000 views, 20,000 views, 50,000 views, 100,000 views. And within like 2 weeks, I'm at like 200,000 views. And I just can't believe my life. And I'm getting comments. People are messaging me, hey, can you make videos like this for my business? Now all of a sudden I got a production company, right? Like it just literally, like it just exploded all from that one. And now I got leverage, and now Grant introduces, gives me leverage to introduce to Ed. And then, because a lot of people are in his world. So now when I send emails, people respond. A lot of times people would say, hey, can you interview me? Like I started getting people inbound opportunities. And so literally that happens. Creator of Hot Cheetos is very similar. I went to 3 speaking engagements of his. He said no 3 times. I chased him down for almost a year. Finally, he goes, you're so persistent. And I said, yeah, consider me the young man you once were, because he was a janitor at Frito-Lay before he pitched the CEO of Hot Cheetos.
The second time you use that.
Yes.
You said it to Grant too.
I
That's a
use
very
that
powerful thing when you put somebody
in your
a way where
shoes.
they can connect with you.
Yeah, because it would have never worked if I said, hey, can I interview you on the podcast? You know what I mean? Like that sounds like a take.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
with Grant, I said, hey, I'd love to promote the 10X book. We'll come to you whenever. So it was always positioned as a value add for them. It was never positioned as come on my podcast energy. It was more of would love to come to you and promote the 10X book since you're in town. Very different ask than, hey, can you be on my podcast, right? Those nuances of communication affect perception massively.
There's a few things I want to get to before you run out of time.
Yeah.
But and you're hitting on a few of them. And so one of the things is like the art of conversation. It's almost like emotional intelligence. Not sure if you've ever told me or we've talked about where that comes from on your end, but actually I think you did say I think you said it was your uncle. But you have a way of approaching people and approaching things it's assertive, it's direct, but it's really gentle. And you're really tuned into like, if I say something a certain way, which doesn't ever come off as anything other than genuine. I've watched you connect with so many people. We've sat and had drinks together. I see the way you connect with people, with strangers, and it is not contrived. So when you're telling me how you approach these people, you should point out the importance of that. And that is a lesson for people to learn how people feel. You may want something from them, and maybe you don't want something from them. You want something for yourself.
Yeah.
That ultimately, I guess, is from them. But the way you say that, man, the way you position that, it makes them want to like give you something, and it worked for you twice with high level people. And I'm sure way more than twice.
I appreciate the compliment, man. Thank you. Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I grew up in a little bit of a chaotic household. And so I had to pick up very quickly on micro communication. If certain individuals were freaking out and super intense, or there was fights, or there was whatever, I had to enter that world of chaos and very quickly neutralize it, even if internally it wasn't neutralized, if that makes sense. Like I had to be
perfect sense, because I grew up in a very similar type of way. And you and I have talked about this. When you're surrounded by chaos, you do need to, typically, it's a maladaptive behavior. You tend to adapt in some way that helps you to navigate and find comfort and control, so that what's the chaos that's going on around you doesn't consume you.
Correct.
And people who grow up in those environments, some of them, and you and I have this in common, tend to become very emotionally intelligent.
Correct.
Because you're aware of what will trigger more chaos.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Correct. Yes, exactly. And it could be something said unintentionally that would trigger
100%.
chaos. So it teaches you that every word matters, the energy of every word matters, that the proactivity of stuff matters. And so, I'll give you an example, little things. For example, even with my significant others that I've dated, one of the things I learned is that men and women are very different, right? And how they communicate the nuances, right? As no big secret, right? So one of the things I learned, for example, in situations like that, and I learned this from Tony Robbins, I believe, is anytime there's a situation where, somebody I'm dating is overwhelmed or flustered or shares something with me, and my natural masculine, like most men, reaction is to give advice or solve the issue, instead of volunteering that, which can sometimes escalate friction, oftentimes escalate friction, as most men watching this know, is instead asking up front, hey, do you want my advice or do you want my support? And
That's right.
I have found that has saved so many headaches and stressful arguments from happening, because a lot of times women want to feel heard and understood more so than they want something to be solved. And as men, we don't have that same biological nature, but we can outsmart that nature by prefacing the question. And so now if they say, hey, I want your support, then you can just, I'm sorry, you're dealing with that. It's permission.
There's somebody, get her name. She's really, really famous. She talks about the concept of why men actually do this. It's not so much biological.
Is it Melissa Peer? Melissa Peer?
No.
Okay.
Shoot, I can't think of her name. It's like it's a household name.
Mm-hmm.
But what she says is
Bren?
Yes. That's it.
Bren Brown or Bren
Brene Brown.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So what she says is, this is really it. As little boys, forever, we're like taught to solve problems. We're taught to fix things. The first thing that you're usually that's bought for you as a little kid is like a toolbox or a tool belt or some little thing to build things on. And so you are actually socialized and conditioned to fix things, or in other words, to solve problems. And then as we get older, like we just inherently know when somebody comes to us with a problem or we hear a problem, we tend to want to fix it. It's like, it is subconscious because we're socialized to do that. Then as we get much older and you're in a relationship with a woman, and you're right, they don't want to be told what to do and they just want to share what's on their mind. Usually I listened to one of her audiobooks once, and she talks about like how her husband's about the bad day she's had or something she's having a problem with, and he'll jump right into, well, why don't you just do this, this, and this? And she's like, it drives me nuts. So, and what you said is actually what she recommends. She's like, what men need to understand is that the woman just does want to just vent and does just want to be heard, but really doesn't want you to solve the problem. And she'll recommend, like what you just said, like you can say a variety of different things, but by asking straight up front, like, hey, would you like me to help you with this? Or, would you really just like me to listen? It's very hard to do that.
Yeah.
To stop and do that is like, I
Yeah.
try and it does work. You can almost guarantee if you want to see the other reaction, just try and fix the problem. And all of a sudden you'll feel the tension,
Someone jokingly said it's the eighth wonder of the world. Yeah, I agree. But they love it, right? Like they go, wow, I've never been asked that. And so now it prefaces, because now if I give my advice, I asked and you said you wanted my advice,
Right. It's
and
right.
if they just want the support, then I'm sorry you're feeling that way. And, you can sympathize or empathize with it. And so I probably say that 3 times a week when I'm in a relationship, and it helps. It helps a lot. So I just learned that there's nuances to communication that if you get those things right, they can mitigate on the back end. One of the things I say is like communication is kind of like buying a house, right? Is the less you pay up front, more you pay in monthly installments. And so the more you pay up front with proactive, cash, quote unquote, the less you have your monthly payments, right? If I pay 3% down, I'm going to have huge monthly payments. If I pay 10% or 20% down, I have smaller payments. So the more work you do up front, the more you can mitigate lesser expenses down the road. And those expenses can be communication, emotion, relationships, business, networking, etc. So the more you value up front, the usually easier it is over time down the stretch. And I learned that with communication.
And one of the many keys to success, and I do want to jump into hearing the feedback on the different things you've learned and like some real like powerful lessons from, you've interviewed millionaires, multi-millionaires, billionaires, heads of companies, founders who became CEOs. I think you did Reebok, the guy who founded Reebok.
Correct.
Right? And on and on and on. And Tom Bilyeu is a household name, and we can go on with 500 plus interviews, and so many of them are so recognizable. But I would suspect that one of the things they would all share, if they didn't share with you, is the importance of communication. So as you've evolved, you inherently knew, and thank you for sharing some of the chaos as you were growing up, which I can relate to you with.
Sure.
But I think very few people actually grow up in that chaotic environment. For the most part, people will probably say, yeah, I had a normal childhood. There was this and that, but I can say that I had chaos, and I can say that I had tremendous dysfunction. And to some degree, it sounds like you had your share of that. So we develop these mechanisms, but for people that don't have that inherently and whether they want to start a show and do what you've done. And again, by the way, your show is watched by people all over the world, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and you are helping people now with producing shows for them and editing and guiding people on their own journey. But that's like the end. Not the end, but that's like fast forwarding to where you are now.
Right.
Communication is important. Communication, no matter what job you're in, no matter what you're doing, and no matter what your goals are or what your dreams are, you have to learn to be a good communicator, and they don't teach you that in school.
Yes. And I've also learned, I learned a lot of it too from pursuing my curiosity. I've always been one to do that. I grew up in an environment where there was a lot of chaos, and I was always told to be quiet, to not ask questions. And your biggest void is your biggest value, right? And so I remember growing up, I'd be in a restaurant and I'd be sitting with my family, but I'd keep quiet. I'd let the adults talk, kind of vibe. And I get it, no fault there, but I had a lot of resentment towards that. I had a lot of pain because I wanted to know, what are the profit margins? Who owns this? I wonder what the kitchen looks like. I always had all these questions.
Natural curiosity.
And if I met an owner, I was fascinated how someone could be the owner of a restaurant, right? Or the owner of something. How does a person made of the same skin, flesh, and bones like me and you, how do they have a Ferrari? Or how do they have $1 million house? Or how did they go from a little baby Google Gaga to I'm the president of the United States? I was so fascinated by the journey because we all start the same. Whether you're broke or born into $1 billion family, we all start pooping in a diaper, and then through a series of steps end up in very different places. And I was always obsessed with the steps that people took, because if they're made of the same skin and bones, they're not that much more intelligent. Their brain matter isn't made of some different material. Their eyes, their nose, their ears, their feet, it's the same. So in a world of constants, what are the variables that got them there? I couldn't articulate it that well, but I was always fascinated. And so I would pursue my curiosity. I would go to Ferrari car shows. I would drive forever to go see. I would meet them. And I was like a quiet kid. I was very confident internally, but very shy externally. Only later did it develop with the show, that external confidence. But I was always when I see a guy with a Ferrari, my first question is how much did it cost? How much were the payments? What did your credit score have to be to finance it? What's an income you recommend it has to be in order for you to justify buying it? Right? I just always thought like that. but who the heck asks people that, right? And so, but I leaned into that, and so I learned you can't do that up front. So I would gradually go like, oh, is this your first? I go to Ferrari cars, just say, oh, I love your car, by the way. Is this your first one? Or is this so I would tippy toe to ask these questions, and it built my curiosity and it built the muscle of communication. But it started with pursuing my curiosity. I think that's how people who don't have hardships or obstacles or whatever a second way they can develop it. Also reading, but again, reading things you're curious about, right? Like I would read biographies, and so I would learn in the biographies, you see what Abraham Lincoln or George Washington or this guy or that gal or this musician or, whatever it is, what they did, like Kanye West, the musician, literally went into the office of Jay-Z, like to the front and like waited to give him a CD. Like, and then so I would see stuff like this, but see from the outside, you imagine that someone was so good that God himself just blessed him with a magic wand. But it's usually they did something that any one of us could have done, but just didn't. They just did the weird, awkward thing and put themselves in an environment for that weird, awkward thing to work. And there's countless stories throughout history of people who've done amazing things, whether you're a Leonardo DiCaprio or you're a whatever. Like I was always fascinated. How do you go from being the person watching people living their dreams to being the person living their dream? I had to find the way, because I realized the environment I was in, the chaos I was in, that was not the way. So I just became obsessed with how do I do that? And communication was a method to bridge that gap.
I've watched you record shows. I've won. I mean, that one with Jake Tran we shot, and I noticed, and I asked you afterwards. I'm sure you don't remember this because it was like sort of insignificant question, but you didn't have any notes.
No,
and I watched you do it, and it was genuine curiosity. I mean, I'm sure you're prepared, right? It's of course you're prepared, but when you have that kind of curiosity, it's very powerful, because even now I have 3 pages of notes and things I wanted to ask you. I haven't asked you one question yet, right? So we're kind of having this kind of conversation where I'm kind of being driven a little bit by my own curiosity, like hearing you tell the stories as somebody who's just curious how you did it. And I'm curious what people have said to you. And so it's the same thing you're saying. How did you get there? How did you do it?
Yeah.
Most people don't know the answers, but most people aren't curious. Like you have a natural curiosity. And I think you're right. I think it does come from that chaos.
At a subconscious level, and I realized this through therapy in the last maybe 3 years or so, is that I had so much pain inside that at a subconscious level, I was so insecure internally and grew up in such chaos that I think it was a defense mechanism to never have to be vulnerable or talk about myself, by it being totally about the other person.
Yeah, makes sense.
Meaning,
I've gone through the same thing, and I've come to the same conclusions. I actually understand you.
Yeah. Meaning like it's actually in a crazy way easy for me when I interview Grant Cardone to not say shit about my own opinion, especially at that time, because I was a nobody. So like I kind of want to I'm like embarrassed by that. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to, so I go, where did you grow up? Where did you this? Not that I'm deflecting, but that I'm allowing myself to be entertained by that, because your mind is going to be filled with something.
Right.
So it might as well be filled with uplifting something of someone else than insecurity of the self. And so I think at a subconscious, conscious motivation, that was a subconscious thing. But then I just became interested, even for me till this day, like I have a curiosity. I could talk to a janitor for an hour. I just care. I don't know. I'm a weirdo in the sense that like I'm permanently aware of death. Like I think about death a lot, and I think about the fact that like how many people do we walk by on a daily basis and say, "Hi, good morning, good to see you," transact, shake their hand, work with. But then they go home and they sit down after a shower, naked in bed or in their underwear in bed, and just go, "Shit, man, what am I gonna do about this? What am I gonna do about that?" And to me, I want to know that person, because that's the real person, not the poise put together. And I think it's because I was so aware of such chaos early on, and nobody was there for me when I was in my vulnerable places. No one was there for me. I never had anybody to talk to, ask questions. So I had all this pain inside. And so it just made me, your biggest void is your biggest value. What you have, the least you seek the most. And so I had the least support. I had the least intellectual connection. And so fast forward, I get to have the most vulnerable and intellectual connections with some of the most inspiring people in the world. Right. And
that's really amazing. So jump into that for a sec, because that is a question I had for you. So you have this interview with Grant, you have several other interviews, and now the thing is actually moving. Right. And you, somewhere along the way, you actually discover, okay, there is going to be a purpose to this show. You've described the purpose. You've said it to me just in this conversation.
Yes.
Right. And I'm sure you have a more like defined mission and purpose for the show, but you are delivering value to everybody that watches that show, every episode, because the curious questions that you're asking just authentically and genuinely is leading to people who are super successful. And by the way, not just financially, many of them are involved in sports, athletics, nutrition, doctors. You said you interviewed today somebody who is a yoga instructor. It doesn't matter what the topic, you are just curious and interested. And so us, the listener, get to hear all these really great nuggets that come out of those conversations. So intentionally or unintentionally, you are delivering value to the world, right? So that comes back to you. Your show is growing and growing and growing. And so give me a few, I don't care if it's 2 or 3. What are the things that you feel that you've taken from some of the most powerful interviews you've done? Maybe share who they were, but what did you take away that's actually changed your life?
Right. Well, I would say it's a couple of things. On the one hand, I think there's something to be said about the fact that so many of the people that we look up to, for me, the most impressionable thing is that they're just made of the same skin, flesh, and bones as me. And so I can get into the tactical, psychological stuff, but I always preface it with that profound thought, because when you're actually there, you see the human side of things. Like, I'll give you an example. I interviewed billionaire John Paul DeJoria, right? He's the founder of Paul Mitchell Shampoo and Conditioner, Patron Tequila. I interviewed him just after he sold the company to Bacardi for $5.1 billion. Needless to say, it was a highlight in his career. And
Wait, the sale or the interview with you?
I guess both. Mine was probably a little more anticlimactic than his, but and so like when I'm in environments like that, for example, we go into his office in Beverly Hills, and I'm like nervous, excited, right? I got this energy, but like he's human. Like, he ran late to the meeting. He stubbed his toe on the desk on accident. His back kind of hurt. He was debating with his team what he should order for lunch, right? Before we started, he had to use the restroom really quick. And so it was like, that sounds so silly, but like when you see the human things like that, it demystifies the impression a lot of us have that they are these like God-given, like, drop down from the heavens for things to smoothly unfold. And you see humanity behind them. When you ask questions and they don't know either, or they forgot it, or like they have issues with their significant other, or they're stressed about this or that, you start to see the human side of things. So before I share about the positive common denominators, I want to show the human side of things, because most of these people that achieve amazing things, and I say it all the time, they're made of the same skin, flesh, and bones as me and you. Depending on people's religious belief, God made them out of the same material, same brain matter, same, like, it's all the same. So in a world of constants, what are the variables? What are the variables, right? Like, that is my obsessive question. What are the variables? What are the variables? And so the variables are what my life's work, essentially, that I explore. And so one of the things I found is that, like, there's 3 main things. Now, of course, there's many, but there's 3 main things, aside from resilience and confidence and hard work ethic and all that. Number 1 is they all have phenomenal teams, all of them. I've never met a single self-made multimillionaire, multi-billion-dollar entrepreneur that didn't tell me at some level that one key hire changed their business time and time and time again. That stopping doing it themselves, having a limited bandwidth of seeing things themselves, playing to their strengths and in their weaknesses, instead of working on their weaknesses, they find someone with strengths in their weaknesses, and that person explodes that side of the business, right? I mean, you were just talking about Grant Cardone, how Grant Cardone was blowing up the 10X movement, but when he brought Brandon Dawson on, he figured out a way for them to, franchise, so to speak, the 10X name onto different industries, right? And so at every level,
now it's just exploding even bigger. I mean,
exactly.
He probably, in fact, I know he didn't from reading Brandon's book, that Grant hadn't thought of these things that Brandon brought to him. And so it's just like, it's exploding now.
Exactly. So the thought there is people increase perspective, new people, new perspective, right? So that's like number 1. Even for example, when I was with John Paul, and he's the only reason I reference him is because he's the biggest quote unquote financial. And so it stands to say, like, okay, it's worth noting in particular, if I see it at every level, particularly that level, okay, clearly it works. Is everything had a person. Like, he wasn't the one making decisions, which I thought was really powerful. While we were setting up for the interview, it took probably half an hour, and we were in his office. He was wearing Vans slip-ons, coolest guy ever, man. Super cool. You feel like you could sit with this guy, have a beer, talk. No ego, relaxed. Obviously, he probably has 5 billion.
Yeah, 5 billion.
Yeah.
Kind of relaxing, probably.
Everything's a lot funnier. You know what I mean? And so, while we're in the office, people come to him. His assistant comes to him and goes, "Hey, what are we going to do about this ad? Or what do you want to do about this marketing thing?" And he was just handing it out. It was unbelievable, because I saw firsthand him going, just tell Steven he can make the decision on that. I don't really know. He doesn't have to check in with me. I trust his judgment. Someone else comes in. "Hey, what do you want to do about this? Talk to Katie, have her make a decision by 3 p.m. tomorrow. If they can't make a decision, have Ralph make it." So he's just like diagnosing people. He's prescribing people to make decisions, and he's not in the business. He's working on the business, and he just has great people. I asked him later, how does he do that? And he goes, it's hiring great people. Because when you hire the best people are self-managing. And so if you have to micromanage people, you probably didn't hire the best people. And he told me something. He said, the first time, someone makes a mistake, it's okay. But repeat mistakes are what get expensive. So he tells his team, I'm okay with anybody making as many mistakes as they want. What I'm not okay with is repeat mistakes. And so like little philosophies like that. So number one, great quality people.
Yeah.
Number two, they all, literally in direct proportion to their wealth is the amount of time they have been in that industry. Time is magic. Time is magic. So many people, especially in this generation, jump around and try different things. They want to expand their business this and this way. But a lot of times the people that get the furthest in business do the simplest things the longest. Paul Mitchell still sells shampoo and conditioner. They didn't get into the soda business, right? They still sell shampoo, conditioner, and soap, right? And so little things like that are, I think, very important. Even with his tequila, one of the things he talked about is, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, there's always room for the best. And when you do things totally different, people don't know how to price it. So for example, with Patron tequila, they were the most expensive, but they would put it in completely different bottles. So how Patron is in the glass bottle with the ball cork. Yeah. So he said that they got really resourceful because he learned in the early days of Paul Mitchell, where everyone was trying to make fancy shampoo and conditioners, they didn't have a lot of money, so they had to bootstrap it. So when they found the suppliers, they got the cheapest packaging they could, which were little white bottles. The white bottles they still use till today. Yes. And they couldn't afford to print on them, so they would just put Paul Mitchell black stickers.
Yeah.
They still use those today.
No,
you see what I'm saying? So so they turned it into vegan. They were also skinnier bottles, but the skinny tended to look like a little more luxury than the big plumpy ones, so they could have higher margins. And so they just became really resourceful with that. So with Patron tequila, where everyone had these big bottles of tequila, they found that by having it square and like smaller, it was cheaper for shipping. People couldn't price compare it because it looked totally different, right? So there was all these like nuances. They knew by calling it Patron, tequila has the highest amount of sales in Mexican restaurants. By calling it something Mexican, they could get into more Mexican establishments. And so it's these little angles that people don't think about that they put obsessive amount of detail into that tend to explode things. So it's the simple things done well more than it's big complex things. And then the last part of it that I realize, amongst all of these people is that they're incredibly resourceful and find creative solutions. How many times in your business or anybody else's business is there a problem, a challenge, or whatever, and there doesn't seem like there's any solution? Time's against the wall, the client is upset, money's an issue, cash flow is tight, but somehow they find the way. And I think of all of the qualities, that is number one. The ability to adapt, to find solutions in a world where there doesn't appear to be any, right? So Dean Graziosi calls it their business solution stamina, right? Your ability to not find a way, but create a way. How many times, for example, I've had a lot of entrepreneurs, I'll keep their names private, but would tell me, a business partner screwed them, or they got into trouble because they couldn't make the rent on the lease of their building, or they couldn't whatever. And somehow they find creative ways to negotiate deals where it works even better in their favor. So the ability to kind of like a Rubik's Cube, like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? What if we did this? Well, what if we did this, but we creatively financed it to do this, this, and this, right? So being willing to create ideas and options in a world where there is seemingly none. Of all the qualities, I think that's the number one that all of the successful people I see have.
That's interesting. I see the same thing. I don't know many billionaires, but I know a lot of people who are striving to be there. And I do find the same thing that there's, and even on my show where I've interviewed them dozens and dozens of business owners who have been self-made successful. They all have creativity and the ability to see things other people don't see.
Correct.
And to be able to pivot and like not really be like so attached to the prior decisions. It's like, all right, no, forget it. We're going this way now. And everybody else is like, what? And we're like, no, we're going this way. Here's why. Share your thoughts on it, but let's go.
Yes.
Yes.
Even for example, I was reading a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which I love. In the book,
a la Jake Tran.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
I got it too.
And in the book, they talk about, I love it. So a lot of times it's simple pivots. So I'll give you an example. This is my favorite story from it. So are you familiar with the company Cirque du Soleil?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like a big famous circus industry that tours all the world.
Yeah.
And so they ended up being successful, massively successful, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. But basically, the guys who ran it had circuses before. And circuses were not doing very well. Not a hot industry. The industry was dying. Everything's the same. It's a lame clown, right? It had a really lame rap, dying industry. Nobody cared. And so literally, instead of calling it the circus, they named it a French Cirque du Soleil, Circus of the Soul. And just by doing that, it completely changed the way in which it was perceived. It completely changed the way in which it would market it. It completely changed the audience to which it was marketed to. And they changed the show from just being, animals to being acrobats. And so those subtle shifts, instead of the local circus calling it Cirque du Soleil, now they had a franchise. Now they could sell it all over the world. Now they could sell in different countries. Now they could license the name to different, right? And it created this whole like $100 million business from a couple of guys who were failed circus owners who came together and created their own blue ocean.
No kidding.
Now it's called Cirque du Soleil. Yes. And there's countless examples of companies that reinvented themselves in a completely different way. And so I think when you can be, I forget who said it, but I think it was Mark Randolph. I interviewed him from Netflix. He said that they went through 14 different iterations of the Netflix business model to realize that $9.99 a month and unlimited streaming was the way. Like now it seems obvious. He goes, it took billions of dollars of revenue, investor meetings, hiring thousands, firing thousands of employees. Like it took all that effort to like $9.99 a month, unlimited streaming.
Yeah,
you know,
to come back to something so simple.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And so Mark Zuckerberg talks about this concept with Facebook that not all ideas come out fully formed. And so having the mental resilience as an entrepreneur to polish what it is and play the long game, that's where things become clear. I'm working on interviewing the founders of Loom, the company where you can screen record. They just sold the company, young guys in their early 30s. They just sold the company for $975 million.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Talk about financial freedom. And these guys started the company less than 10 years ago, 975 million. And it's 3 partners, I believe. I'm working on interviewing them. But when they first launched, the business model changed like 6-7 times. But at the end of the day, it screen records. Like it's a very simple function.
Everybody uses it. I use it all the time in business. It's super simple and super valuable. And it's I had no idea that was the story behind them. That's wild.
Oh yeah, their story is fascinating. And it's
Wild.
crazy because Zoom could have done it. Like think about Zoom. Zoom had the capacity, the infrastructure, the customer, the client acquisition. Zoom had everything. And now Zoom actually has that capacity. They added it, but it took them so long to adapt to it.
Playing
Whereas
catch up.
Loom came in and these guys are set up for life. So my point is like it's usually simple things done well, but it takes going through a lot of complexity sometimes with the right partners, people, and mental resilience to see the simple.
And so through all these interviews, I mean, you're hearing that these are common themes.
Yes.
That's really, we want people to take something away from this today. And there's a lot to take away because you've touched on, even as you're telling your stories, there's so many nuggets in those stories you're telling about resilience, being persistent. This is what I heard, getting out of your own way, overcoming your own limitations, which are up here. It goes on and on and on. And people, no matter how much money they've made or how big they've gotten in the eyes of the rest of us, everybody wakes up every day, puts the pants on one leg at a time.
Yes.
And so it does help to simplify that as you're evolving and you're going and getting, I think you said you have 25 more guests lined up. Your show is evolving because you didn't have, I think earlier on, you didn't exactly say what your vision was because early on you didn't have a vision, but you do have a vision. You do now know where you want to take things. And where is that? Tell me where that is and tell me how you plan to do that and how long you think that's going to take. Like, where do you go from here?
Yeah. So my mission from the very beginning was to humanize greatness one story at a time. And I find that the best founders of companies, the best, the longest lasting people that do it because they love it and it solves a problem for themselves. Like, for example, when you see a, Cristiano Ronaldo or a Lionel Messi in soccer or whatever, these guys didn't play soccer to make $100 million. They played soccer because they love it, right? When you see people, for example, like even to the Bacardi example, right? He created that product because he liked his own tequila. Like he liked to custom make his own tequila and saw an opportunity in the market. The guys who pivoted from their company, there was a startup thing, to Loom, is because they were trying to screen record instructions to have a developer change the original website they were working. They couldn't figure out how to screen record it, right? So usually that turned into the thing. When you solve a problem for yourself, wouldn't you know, there's probably millions of people that you could solve it for too. Right. Versus like, how do I do something to make money? Very often that's short-lived. I know a lot of my friends in the space. I have a lot of friends who made $1 million, $2 million, get a model girlfriend, get a supercar, and 2 years later they're $500,000 in the hole, right? I'm sure we all have examples of people that have made millions and lost it. But I find that the people who have the longest sense of fulfillment usually play games that they enjoy winning over the long haul. Meaning, like, people who are very successful in business over a long period of time usually don't have their anchor just from business, but usually have longevity in their health. And that becomes a pillar with which they have confidence to then support their business. I know for you, you have a very successful business, but you have a multi-million-dollar business in cybersecurity and doing a lot of cool things with amazing clients. There's no denying you're one of the healthiest guys I know. And like, wouldn't you also admit that health played a huge role in helping you have the mental capacity to do what you're doing?
I think it I've never stopped to think about that actually, but the answer is yes. There's no question. And now that you mention it, when I do look at all these people are flashing through my head now that I know who don't do what I do. And yeah, it's the stamina, but the mental stamina, the emotional stamina, not just physical. And I think the drive, like it all ties to the fact that I go to the gym. I mean, now it used to be more, but it's at least 5 days a week, at least 1 to 2 hours each time, one way or the other. And no matter what, I am not skipping that, but I address my business and my professional life in the same exact way. It's just part of who I am. Right.
Right.
So
It's
I
an
do notice that
identity.
they do go hand in hand. Yeah.
It's an identity, and it's about doing things right, not about doing things quick.
I'm about to be 51 in a couple of days. Now it is like you can't relate yet, but when you get to a point where you know that you are on the backside, you're on the back
Yes.
nine, and I don't have 40 years ahead of me to keep building and building and building. I
Right.
do feel. I mean, I'm only gonna be 51, but
Right.
I mean, the shot clock is definitely shorter than it used to be.
Right. And it's interesting you say that, Matt, because one of the things, and I'm super excited to share this concept, this will be a good clip, is one of the things that I've also learned from all these successful people is that income is directly correlated to time horizon. Here's what I mean by that. The lowest income earning people on the planet think about how much money they make an hour. Billionaires think about how much money they make over a decade or 2 decades, right? I'll give you an example. Jeff Bezos was literally tens of billions of dollars in debt before he became the richest man in the world. So arguably speaking, Jeff Bezos was the most in-debt man in human history and also became the wealthiest man in human history. So the pendulum swings both ways. If you're not willing to be the brokest man in history, you can't be the richest man in history, figuratively speaking, but also in this case, quite literally speaking. And so imagine if he was worried about netting $3 million in the first 3 years versus making hundreds of billions over the course of 15 or 20. You see what I'm saying? And so the highest paid people in the world think in terms of time horizons like that versus younger. So on a more practical sense, billionaires think about making money in decades. People who make hundreds of millions of dollars think, 10 to 15, 20 years, maybe a decade plus or so. People who make tens of millions of dollars think, under that. People who want to make a couple $1,000,000 think over the next few years. People who make $1,000,000, think maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years. People who make 6 figures think about the year. People who make 10 grand a month focus on making 10 grand a month. People who, get a good wage focus on making a good, weekly wage, and minimum wage employees get paid by the hour. You see what I'm saying? So see how
True.
income is directly correlated to time horizon with which you are prioritizing your worth. How many people do you know won't work for less than $15 an hour, right? Like people raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I won't work for less than that. But how many, multimillionaires, yourself included, have worked for hundreds of hours for no pay just to finally get to a point where you could set the business up and later make way more to make up for all the lost time, right? But a lot of people won't be willing to do that. And so it's about thinking long term. I find that directly correlates to people's income. And in a day and age where social media makes you, compete and have ego with everybody else, it's a very challenging thing to do.
That is, first of all, it's very true. And as you're speaking, like I'm relating to it as a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you earlier, the conversation I had with my friend Steve and joining a program that he runs at Cardone. And he and I talked about that exact concept. I always thought in terms of 5-year clips. And if I look back over my life, 5 years, well, look what happened. 5 years. And even the people in my company, I recently said to them, some of them specifically, you don't think about what today, tomorrow, next month. Think about what's going to be the next 5 years. It takes so long to put the effort and the work in and for things to actually happen that are really big, like big changes, big outcomes.
Right.
So this guy, Steve, I was talking to, he's like, oh man, think about 10 years. Just said it to me last weekend. Think about 10 years. And when I thought about 10 years, I'm like, wow. So I'll show you something real quick. I picked this up from...
It gives you permission to take your time in the macro, which feels slower, but in the grand scheme of things may actually be faster.
Did I show you this? I have on my phone. This is my screen. Hold on.
100 million.
This is a
25
a
million
vision board.
portfolio. I love it.
Right. So I got that from Steve Harvey. I was talking about the one he uses. So I'm like, I'm going to put that down because now every time I look at my phone, I see these numbers. And $100 million seems like a lot of money. And it is a lot of money, but when you put it in perspective, over the course of the next 10 years, there's no reason whatsoever that I shouldn't be worth that. I mean, you know more about me and my business and the things that I'm working on. Is it realistic it's going to happen in 2 or 3 years? No, man. And if I thought that, I would be really setting myself up for disappointment and failure. But over the next 10 years, hell yeah, it should happen sooner than that.
Yes.
And that shift in my mindset, it really changed like everything. just by
Right.
thinking about it that way. And every single thing I do, every decision I make every day,
Yeah.
it's all leading towards that 10 years from now.
Exactly. And same thing with working out, the fittest people in the world aren't focused on optimizing over the next 3 to 6 months. It's just a lifestyle, and they're going to be
That's
working
right.
out. You're going to work out 5 days
Right.
a week, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 3 years from now, 2 months from now. So, and those are more fit than the guy who's on the 90-day sprint. I saw a thing, it says the man who walks longer will always go further than the man who runs this week.
Oh, that's good.
You know
That's
what I'm
good.
saying?
Yeah, that's good.
And so, yeah, the man who likes walking will go further than the man who runs and burns out, And so,
Yeah.
it's about brilliance at the basics, who can do it longer, and over a long enough time horizon, time is magic, and then making sure you're ready for the opportunity too. Because here's the last part of it. Highly successful people, you were very kind to talk about my communication and complimenting it. The one thing I realized is very successful people have been razzled and dazzled and scammed and fooled by resumes and prestige. And I went to this university. They've seen all the character things. So what most people value at the end of the day is the human, how people make them feel. If you can make someone feel relaxed, like I'll give an example, even on a practical level. If I go to a hotel, and I hate being cheap. I dislike the element of being cheap or being like, hey, But if you can elegantly, like if you check, I do this all the time, and all the time blessings happen. You go to a hotel and you're at the checkout thing. You say, hey, by any chance, is there anything possible we could do about a late checkout? I know you guys don't normally do that, but appreciate whatever you could do. See, subtle versus like, hey, by the way, can we get a late checkout, please? Or can we get a late checkout? And they're like, no, and they're like, are you sure? Because we just got in late. We want to, see how like there's
energy, the tonality, the way they feel like.
Exactly. But if you're
it works for you, probably.
Yeah. And if you're polite and elegant, say, hey, I know you guys don't normally do this, but is there by any chance, could you guys extend it to later? I'm happy to pay a fee if we need to. It's not a problem. Oh, no worry. I'll take care of that, all the time. And that happens in many a context. I think people have an innate nature to help people who are nice to them. People have reciprocity. But if you just activate it, it's a knee-jerk response. How's your day? Good. How are you? Like you naturally ask it back. You don't consciously ask it back. And so there's triggers like that in communication, not in a manipulative context, in a genuine connection context. And the more you do that, and the more you get confidence of the proof of concept, the more you see it apply to more things. And you feel it when it happens to you.
Oh, yeah. Have you read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss?
Yes. And
I feel like you were just telling a story. I know you weren't, but he talks about a similar thing. I think he even gives the example of going in a hotel. He actually takes it a step further where he's like, if you lead in with like, I'm sure I doubt you can do this. In fact, you probably don't even have the authority to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
And it actually causes the person to like not want to say, no, I don't have the authority. They actually want to help. And you follow it with what you said, typically like you'll get the upgrade.
Exactly. And if you talk to a manager, say, I was wondering if a manager was in. Yeah, hi, sorry to bother you, but I know you're probably the only person with the authority to do this. Just wondering if he's the manager, so he wants to exercise his power, right? Because before someone's a manager or president or vice president or millionaire or billionaire, they're a naked person with their own insecurities, their own doubts, their own worries. And when people make them feel good, they want to keep that good feeling going. So they do their part to keep it going.
That can all be learned, by the way. Did you have Chris Voss on your show, or were you trying to? I think you were telling me.
I did. Yep.
He was already on?
Yep. I had him on.
I didn't see it. Did it come out yet?
Yep.
Okay. I didn't see that one.
Came out on Zoom. Yep.
But that's stuff that can be learned. And just, we started off by talking about unlocking the secrets that billionaires can probably share. Everything that we've talked about, it's the same secret that you would hear from Millionaire. It takes the communication skills and like the things you can learn. You need that to become a millionaire and to become a billionaire. Like you need it at every level. And the things that you can get like from Chris Voss, this stuff isn't new. Like it's been around, for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it gets repeated over and over and over. It's just a matter of like somebody unlocking the knowledge for you. And that's what you're doing today. Like you're sharing and unlocking a lot of knowledge in every show you put out. Other people are sharing their knowledge. And so being able, as you said before, to actually hear it, to be open to listening, to hear what people have to say, and then being able to do something with it. Anybody can do this. Anybody can take this information and they can start a show. You're doing a lot with your show. And as we talked about before, you're helping people produce their shows. You've helped me on my show with directing certain things and helping me to produce things. If somebody has an idea, they want to articulate that idea. They don't know how. As you started out our show, just find a mentor, find somebody to help you. There are so many people that can get you on the path. That's the first step. The first step is take action. As we wind this down, I want to bring us to that point. Like the first step is take action. The second step is take action. right?
Yes.
Be determined, find your perseverance. And the story that Omar has told today, it can be your story. It can be anybody's story if they're willing to put in the time that he's put in, getting back to that topic. And maybe you want to close this out with taking my thought and finishing it up.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's three main things that anybody can do at every level, whether you're zero, you're successful, want to get to the next level, is number one, realize that every single person around you, every single person above you, every single person who's achieved things that you look at and go, I want to do that, was just as insecure, just as unsure, and just as scared as you. The number one common denominator of all people who take their dreams serious and take the first step is they took imperfect action. Imperfect action will be a recurring theme over and over and over and over again. In life or at work, people give you instruction. In school, there's a syllabus. In a book, there's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. On tests and exams, at work, answer this question specifically, it ends here. In business, it's an open loop, never closes. It's 24/7. There's a new idea that could double your income tomorrow, and you might have to think for 50 hours to come up with one 12-second idea that 10x's your life, your income changes your life forever. You have to realize that imperfect action is the key, because you might not have full context, but action creates clarity. Action creates clarity. So the more imperfect action you're willing to take, in the case of me pursuing my dream, driving to Grant Cardone, that was imperfect action. Nervous what to say, agreeing to do the interview, setting up the interview, negotiating it, getting one interview, imperfect action. So a pattern of imperfect action. Now I can look back and be the cool guy who's like, yeah, I've done hundreds of interviews with billionaires. I'm the man. I'm this cool guy, right? Like, not that I lay into that persona, I'm being humorous. But, it started with me being an insecure, nervous dude who, in spite of that, felt the fear and did it anyway. So number one, imperfect action. Number two is you have to write things down, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Torah, whether it's the Quran, no matter what religious thing you come from, God himself wrote things down for people before they became prophecy that's true. So who are we as people, as imperfect beings, to not write things down and think they're going to work? No building on this planet, no piece of technology, no building, no cloth, no clothing, no car, nothing in your universe that you physically own as a tangible asset has not been drawn or written down on paper first. Zero. Your goals are no different.
That's powerful.
Your goals are no different. So people who don't write down their goals or what they want in their partner or what they want in their life or the car they want or the income they want or where they want to live or whatever, if you don't write it down, how is it going to happen? You never it's like going to a restaurant, never placing the order and then being upset that it didn't show up. You got to place your order to God. You got to place your order to the universe. You got to write it down. You have to command it. Otherwise, why would it come to you? There's only so many of them. It's going to go to the guy or gal that ordered it, period. You know what I mean? True. And so that's the first thing, writing it down is so important. Like literally your house, your car, everything. Imagine if you bought a car or lived in a house that the person who built the car or house didn't write down or draw down or create blueprints for. They just won't get out of the ideas in their head with their team.
There's nothing that I've done in business or like, there's no goal that I've hit that didn't start with writing it down. I mean, I can just say for myself, everything gets written down. Maybe because I like to check the box off. It makes you feel good. But yeah, exactly. I mean, I had to see it. Even writing it down and seeing stuff on my phone every day. You're right.
Even a computer, smartest things on the planet, can't do we like Chat GPT. Right. You have to write it down. Chat GPT doesn't just hear you think about it. You got to type it in. You got to input it into the database. So many people don't do that. And there's a great expression says what's easy to do is also easy not to do it. And I find that most people, it's things like that hold them back. And the last part of it is environment beats discipline 7 days a week. I used to argue this and think you can get past it, but environment is important. So important. So whether you have a chaotic household, chaotic significant other, whatever it is so important to create an environment that fosters your growth. It is so important to create an environment where you're not at the mercy of something that's not working. And even if, for example, you're in a situation or a marriage or a relationship or a household or your parents' household or a financial situation or the city you live in or whatever circumstance you happen to be in, you can create mental environments. When I was younger, I didn't come from like the most privileged area or the supportive, super awesome, environment. So I used to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to Beverly Hills sometimes just to work out of the lobby for free, just so I could be around the energy, hear how they talk, hear how they dress. I used to see heroes of mine who would date these beautiful girls, and I would go, man, like, what are they doing? It would contextualize to my mind. I would see a guy in a Mercedes S-Class, and I would go, man, $100,000 Mercedes. What would that be like? But when you get around it, you see it. I would go to dealerships. I can't tell you how many times I went to the Mercedes dealership when I had no money in my bank account. I would sit in the car that I now own. I would do stuff like that. I would go to Ferrari car shows. I still haven't got a Ferrari. God willing, in the cards, in a couple years or less. But, it's just like silly things like that. Not that the things matter, but bring them around you, right? Proximity is power. You'll never date the girl you never got next to. You'll never drive the car you never showed up in. You'll never buy a house or real estate investment that you didn't physically look at with your eyes. So don't let your current situation limit you and say, oh, I'm going to go to the dealership for the car I want when I have it. I'm going to go find the girl I want when I have it. I'm going to go to that nice city when I have it. Go walk around the city you want to live in. Go create a vision board. Go contextualize it to your mind, familiarize it to your mind. So it's not this scary foreign thing, but it's rather a friend that feels really familiar. By the time you get there, by the time I got my car, I knew more about it than the salesperson selling it to me at Mercedes, right? Like, so I find that is so important, like environment is huge. And if you think about it, I saw a study that said 80% of multi-million and multi-billion-dollar companies actually had business partners. When you look at Facebook, business partners. When you look at Google, Sergey and Larry, right? Business partners.
Being uncommon actually is important, and like embracing change, which is where growth happens. Those things are so important. But with so many people around that are naysayers, right? Being uncommon sometimes is difficult. And so many of these people have done great things, and whether they're large scale things that have been recognized by a lot of people, or they're just what they consider great in their own life. It's those naysayers that are like, oh, you can't do that. Or, like, why would you own rental property? Who wants to be a landlord?
Right.
I think one message, I know you and I have talked about this, is it's nice that they have their opinions, but they probably haven't done what they're telling you not to do anyway. And if you have a dream and if you have goals, it's important to find a way to tune out those naysayers and to just respectfully, okay, everybody has their opinion, but believe in yourself and don't let somebody tell you that you can't do something just because they don't think it's possible, right?
Yes. And one of my mentors is Dr. John DeMartini. I love this guy. He talks about this concept of when the voice and the vision on the inside are louder than the voices and the visions on the outside, that's when you've mastered the game of life. And so often, a lot of us, we don't trust ourselves.
You got to write a book of these, man. Like these like Omar's proverbs.
A lot of them are, I'm not the originator of it, but I'm the synthesizer of them, or the contextualizer of them, the conduit, if you will. But yeah, he taught me that concept. And he says, if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, then by default, your day will fill up with low priority distractions that don't. So let me say that again. If you don't fill your day, and the equivalent is your business, if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, then by default, your life will fill up with low priority distractions that don't. In a simpler metaphor, where seeds don't grow, weeds do. See, a seed you need to plant, you need to water, you need to give sunlight, you need to be intentional. A weed, if you do nothing, weeds will grow and ruin your whole garden.
That's right.
So life is the same. You can't be neutral on a moving train, and life is a moving train, and it's not moving on your side. If you sit there and do nothing, you'll get older, you'll get wrinkly, you'll get fatter, you'll get more in debt, you'll rack up bills, you'll get more anxious in your mind, you'll get, right? If you do nothing. So you're fighting against the wind in a certain context in life, right? Time, age, health, right? Cells, right? And so it's not just like, oh, if I do nothing, nothing happens. No. If you do nothing, a whole lot of bad shit's going to happen. If you do bad shit,
that's
worse shit's going to happen. That's a guarantee. And Tony talks about it in a perfect way. He says, Tony Robbins, he says, if you do good things, you'll have an okay life. If you do great things, you'll have a good life. If you do amazing things, you'll have a great life. So you always have to do more than you want, right? You always have to
what a calibration that is.
Yeah. So you have to kind of like overpay.
Do that.
Most people don't even pay the price for what they want, let alone overpay. You got to overpay. Because here's the thing, kind of like in real estate, you make money in the opportunity as it goes on through time on the appreciation of the asset. In this case, it would be you, and you don't necessarily make it on the buy. In fact, you probably lose on the buy, right? And so, but see, some people fight that, other people embrace it, and the last thing I would say is, like, you have to find a way to make the game winnable. You have to define the game in a winnable way. For example, if I told you, hey, get in the best shape of your life over the next 12 months, people say, okay, fine, I'll do that. But if I say, hey, you're fighting Conor McGregor in 12 months, 100 million people are going to watch you and we'll pay you 30 million. Now go get in shape. All of a sudden, your level of commitment to fitness is a lot easier. That Snickers is not even a question. And so having something so compelling at the end of it, that it makes a lot of the decisions for you is so important. I find that my uncle, to tie the whole interview together here, my uncle David, rest in peace, he told me something I'll never forget. He got diagnosed with cancer. He was my biggest mentor, my biggest hero ever. He was like a father figure to me in a world where I didn't really have a voice. He would pick me up when I was a kid and take me to seminars. He went to T. Harv Eker's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I was like 15, 16. He taught me how to drive. I'll never forget. I got out of soccer practice. I was 14 one time. He gave me the keys to his Cadillac and said, drive home. I was like, oh, I don't know how to drive. I never done this. He goes, figure it out. Just put it on me. And he sat down and had a little something to drink. I won't say what it was, but had a little something to drink, enjoyed the ride, and was teaching me how to drive like that. And he took me to seminars. He would take me to all this stuff, and it taught me at a very young age, just dive right in. And this guy was diagnosed with cancer, which everyone said was terminal. I remember his attitude was fuck that shit. Pardon my language, but that was his attitude. It was like terminal, like it's not terminal. Like just created his own reality. And so he told me that when he was doing cancer treatment, they told him there are 3 things to have a great life we all need. It's something to do that we love, something to look forward to that we love, and someone that we love that loves us back. If you have something to do, something to look forward to, and something that you love, you have a great life, no matter the assets or the this or that. And wouldn't you know that people who have all 3 of those things usually get the money too, usually get the health too, usually have the high quality relationships too. And that philosophy kept him alive 18 years when doctors gave him less than 12 months to live. So wow. I was with him several weeks before he passed. And I'll never forget it, man. I'm going to tear up, man. But my Uncle David was huge to me, man. He gave me my first book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah, and in the cover, he wrote, Omar, this will teach you how to, he was a real estate investor. He was the man. He told me never be a worker bee. And he said, don't be a worker bee, own the hive. I'll never forget that. He told me, even in that, that when bees work in the hive for the honey, they don't all participate in the honey. There's only a few key bees that actually get all the honey in the hive, right? And so he told me, don't be a worker bee. And he taught me this concept of investing in yourself, going to seminars, being vulnerable in seminars, writing goals and intentions. And here he was with his Cadillac. He had a Rolls Royce. He would pick me up, take me to seminars, corrupt me, give me my Playboy magazines. He was the cool uncle, took me golfing. Took me to a bar, ordered me a beer. My first beer, I didn't even want to drink. He just like ordered it, put it next to me. He was such a cool character, man. He just like thrust in a lot. He happened to life. He told me there's 2 types of people in life. One is the type that life happens to them, and the other type is people who happen to life. So always ask yourself, am I the type of person where life is just going to happen to me and I'm going to react, or did I happen to life? Uncle David happened to life. And he said, if you have something to do, something to look forward to, and someone to love that loves you back, you have a great life. And so in business, I try to create that, because money is futile. Oh, hit this amount of how many times have you set a financial goal, you hit it, and you go, what now? Yeah, and you lose.
It's easy to say that when you hit a lot of goals, and it is fun to have money, but if the things you just said aren't true, there's not a lot of quality in your life.
Exactly. And you just change the game. For example, like say you're making X amount of money, but like my goal is to buy 3 real estate investment properties. So now that's the thing to look forward to, right? It's not just this amount of revenue. Okay, so I want to get to this level of cash flow. So then I want to do that. So higher levels of business you go when it's beyond your needs. Now you're playing it for sport, not for survival, right? And so if you have something to look forward to, something to do on a daily basis, whether fitness, activity, and someone to love, whether it be friends or intimate relationship, if you have those things, particularly something to look forward to, makes life worth living. How many people do we know? I heard after people retire, their mortality rate tends to go down, meaning a lot of people die shortly after retirement or when they sell their business.
No purpose anymore.
Yeah, or their significant other passes away and they pass away, right? Like if you're so dependent on that, you don't have something to look forward to. Yeah, literally, there's no life force. There's no motive.
It's crazy. People say to me all the time, like, "Oh, you're building your company. You're going to sell it in a couple of years. So you can retire." And I'm like,
"Yeah,
what? That's not retiring. I'm not retiring. Like ever." Like there's no like that. God, that would be boring.
Right.
It's like how unfulfilling, and not to offend anybody who wants to retire. It's the dream, but it's not, it's not my dream.
Right. Right. And so I find that if you have those 3 things, good attitude, good energy, good sleep, good people around you, someone to look forward to, find vehicles, test things, then you're made of the same skin, flesh, and bones that any imperfect person who took imperfect action could do. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people who are no smarter than you.
That's right.
You possess all of the constants to make your dreams a reality. The question is, will you control the variables and put the variables in your favor and learn from people who've done it before you? If you do that, I think you'll have a great life. And if you don't, life will happen to you instead of you happening to it.
I mean, I've talked with you for, 2 years back and forth about coming on and having a conversation, and you and I talk all the time about other stuff, but you did not disappoint. This is, and frankly, like I said, I have like 2 pages of notes. I actually only asked you 1 question. You make it easy because you tell good stories and really there's so much value in everything you say. I don't know how you remember all these little, it's amazing how this all is in your head and you could just pull them out.
The student that needs it the most is usually the best teacher. So a lot of it comes out of necessity, necessity and pain.
I really hope that this is going to be out there forever. I know you do interviews. You've been on some pretty cool shows, but I do hope that at least something that we've said here today does really impact somebody, and a lot of people. Hopefully we can reach some people and makes a difference in their life. And that's really the point of our conversation. And I'm glad after us working together for so many years that we got to do this together. But I want to thank you for doing this, man. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Happy to do it again whenever you need, and happy to add value. And thanks for digging in, man.
Oh, I love that. Where can we find you? What do you want to share? What do you have what's happening? Any books coming out? Any movies?
So I'm actually working on a book. It's going to be out in 2024. We also have a supplement coming out at the end of 2024 for brain supplement. So super excited for all of that stuff. People can find me on Instagram at Omar_the_rockstar or on YouTube and check out all the stuff we have coming soon.
Tell me real quick about the supplement. Like you didn't mention that.
So that'll be out 2024. Can't say too much about it yet, but it'll be basically to help with focus.
Are you partnering with Jim Quick?
No, I'm not partnering. 2423. I'm actually working with a couple of partners on a brain supplement, and that'll be delivered in a unique form to help people with cognitive focus and energy.
Phenomenal.
Can't say too much more, but let me just say it'll be a product that I believe in, needed. Awesome. And I know so many other people need as well. So
unpolitically correct, but there's one individual that we all know. I want to have him be your first customer.
Let's do it.
Thanks again, man. I love it. We'll talk real soon.
All right. Appreciate you, brother. God bless.
Be good.
Thank you, Matt. Honored to be on. Thank you.